This is an article that came out in The Hill, March 15th, 2018. There's actually a group that's kind of researching and fact checking what Rex Tillerson said in Africa. And, you'll hear in the article, what their findings are. But apparently, Trump and America now have a bad image problem in Africa. Wonder why, right? Trump team bashes China but offers no alternative in African nations. They have no alternatives here in America, so that's not shocking. The now former Secretary of State Tillerson talking points for his hastily arranged trip to Africa last week accused China of fostering dependency with opaque contracts, predatory loan practices, and corrupt deals that mire nations in debt, hurting growth and local employment. Is China really a predatory lender in Africa? It's clear that Tillerson's last trip as Secretary of State to Africa was an attempt to try to repair relations with the continent that was outraged by Trump's foul language in discussing their country. Pointing a finger at China is already deflecting attention from the Trump administration's image problems. But are these accusations true? Two research groups have been tracking Chinese loans globally and in Africa for the past decade. Predatory lenders use deception and fraud to entice borrowers to take out expensive loans they don't really need and can't afford. But it seems that China's loans fund projects African borrow really do need, and the loans generally have favorable terms. But sub-Saharan um, Africa, about 600 million people have no access to electricity. You know, here we are in 2018, and that's a shame. Africans are still living without electricity. But again, America's been in there for 5 decades and could have helped these people get on their feet and chose just to go in there and take the resources and help no one but themselves. About 600 million people have no access to electricity. Between 2000 and 2017, nearly $35 billion of loans. Um, and it's saying that the GDP Center database finance power generation and transmission. So they have been putting power in parts of Africa that never had power before. One power station producing 100 milliwatts of electricity can support 80,000 jobs in low income countries, according to some estimates. That's a lot of employment. 20 years ago, only 12% of African roads had well weathered paving, while bridges, airports, and railways were in despair. Many in conflict affected countries like Angola, Liberia, and the Congo. Not surprisingly, African governments have borrowed 30 billion from Chinese banks during this period to pay for transportation infrastructure. Chinese loans can sometimes be tied to Chinese construction companies, although they do employ African workers as well. Low commodity prices for exports have created difficulties for some countries like Zambia and Angola in servicing loans from China. But were terms for these loans okay? So they're asking, if the terms for these loans might have been shady. It doesn't appear to, So it's not appearing that China is doing predatory loans with Africa. Loans from China to official policy banks made up 80% of the 97.5 billion lent by China. And that was the money they lent to Africa, to different countries. It didn't just go to one place. Policy bank loans are lent at low fixed interest rates, usually 2%, or at commercial rates. Okay. In one big borrower, Angola, Chinese oil secure loans for which have terms were actually lower than that similar to oil backed loans from Western bank syndicates. So the West have more predatory loans in Africa than Chinese does. Okay. The Trump administration would have a better argument if they were offering an alternative. There are legitimate concerns about the extent to which Chinese development finance in infrastructure and energy is lower carbon and socially inclusive. But both of our groups are studying these aspects. But the West backed banks, such as World Banks, had all but abandoned infrastructure financing on a continent in desperate need of infrastructure. So there you go. That's how China scooped in. They saw the Western nations weren't doing anything about the infrastructure in China, and that's how they got in there and started building up and won the confidence of the people. In 2013, the Obama administration belatedly began to address Africa's electricity shortages and access problems through its Power Africa program. Power Africa promises to be more socially inclusive, address access issues, finance off grid energy, and put a premium on green energy. The program offers a mere 7 billion for energy on the continent, but has had trouble getting off the ground. And China had already invested 5 times the total amount earmarked. The president has had a chance to make his own mark in Africa, but now he has two strikes against him with his derogatory comments about the region and former Secretary of State Tillerson's finger pointing at the country willing to step up and address some of the continent's most pressing needs. Trump would do better to put his money where his mouth is and offer a better alternative, scaling up Power Africa with better terms and better outcomes than those on offer. Until then, he should welcome the void the United States has abandoned. So there you go. They're saying, China is at least offering them loans and building up the infrastructure. The US is not doing anything but, ladies and gentlemen, let's say it all together, talk, talk. All right. So again, I mean, it's good that these things are happening in Africa for the first time. I understand why they would want it. If you never had something before in your life, electricity and some of the basic things, transportation, electricity, jobs, you can understand what the attraction is in Africa with the Chinese. Do I still think they should be there? No. I don't believe the Chinese people should have a permanent presence in Africa. I don't believe America should have that, nor do I believe any of the Western nations in Europe should have that. I think it's okay to trade with a country without having a permanent presence there. I just hope one day Africa can stand on their own 2 feet and start ushering out these other nations that have just done nothing but rape out the resources and done very little to help the continent and the people there. That's the problem with the West. The West wants to go in there and just take all the resources and then offer those people absolutely nothing. And that's not right. And they know this shit ain't right too, y'all. They know it ain't right. But they don't care because see these people don't look like them and don't resemble them. So they don't care. But please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell twice and join me on Black Junction TV and blackspot.com. Peace, family.